Studios. This is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
All right, 6 minutes after 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. You know, we're coming upon the day of love, Valentine's Day, right? Everybody loves to fall in love. It's just part of being a human, right?
Yeah, it is.
But when you're the dad of a daughter, right? Yeah, I mean, you've got every fiber of your being is saying, wait a minute, who's this coming to the door? Who's this calling? Who's this texting? Who's this, right? Mm-hmm. Right? I don't know. I mean, we do the same thing with the sons, but I think when there's a daughter, there's a special need, I guess an instinctive need to try to figure out if this guy's really a good guy. And you got to try to read between the lines because the bad guy can look good, you know?
Exactly.
And how do you know? I mean, I always feel like for us guys, when you're in a bad relationship, it seems like we can get out of it easier. I don't know why that is. But when you ladies are in a bad relationship, you stay there for so long. I don't want to say who, but I remember a few people who've had that, and it's kind of hard. You don't know what to say, you know. Maybe the book that we're about to talk about will help those who have gone through this. It is Susan Sparks' true story. It is it's called Sparks in Love. It's a survivor story. And let me just give you a few credentials before we say hello. Susan is an investigative journalist, a survivor of domestic abuse. You might have already picked up on that. She's a domestic abuse counselor. She's the founder of the SodaPop.com. Soda is an survivor of domestic abuse. Oh, that's kind of clever. Which is an online home where people can go for help, education, and the community of others who are domestically abused. Well, there's a good resource right there already. So let's say hello to Susan. Good morning, Susan. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
And where are you calling from?
I am on the East Coast as well.
Okay. The East Coast, that's pretty broad. It's like we're talking to a CIA agent, Robin. I'm on the East Coast.
I know. I don't blame her.
I'm on planet Earth. Yeah. I hear you. No, you don't want somebody to know. So tell me about your story. It sounds like you went through some hard times, and it sounds like it wasn't short-lived. It was a long-lived thing you went through.
It absolutely is. And you touched on something that was, you said so many things that were really important just a moment ago, and so many things that I would love to respond to, but it was a very long story, and I think that's why I ended up writing a book about it. I met my then husband when I was in my 20s, and I ended up staying in this relationship through my 20s, my 30s, and finally got the motivation and the strength together to leave in my 40s. So that's a really long time to stay. And you said, why do women stay? I think there's a lot of different reasons that we stay, and a lot to talk about there.
Now, it's different for everybody, and I don't want to go someplace that's uncomfortable for you, but if the abuse is emotional, again, I'm speaking from a dad's point of view, because I obviously am not a woman, but there's the emotional abuse, there's the physical abuse. Can you share with us what exactly you were going through?
Absolutely. My relationship was completely, up until the very end, a relationship of domestic abuse. And I think, what makes that so different for many, and for me, specifically, is domestic abuse is something that you can't see. I didn't actually realize that I was a victim of domestic abuse because I knew what domestic violence was, right? I understood when people were physically injured and being hit, and bruised, that was domestic violence. That's very clear to me as an individual. I didn't understand that there was something called domestic abuse. So I thought I was just in this really bad marriage with someone that turned out to have a toxic personality and had very high standards for me as his wife that I just couldn't seem to meet. And what I didn't understand was this is a whole cycle of abuse that I had gotten trapped in, and I might have gotten out a lot sooner if I had understood that this is a game that the victim will never win. So I think that's really important for people to understand. If they're trapped in this, I'm a fixer by nature, so I kept thinking, I can fix this. I love this person. I can do what he's saying. I can be better. I can look better. I can cook better. I can do all of the things
Oh, no.
he's telling me I'm not doing well. But you'll never meet their standards.
Just from the outside looking in, sometimes I've noticed ladies who have a lot of talent in something, but they are never appreciated for that talent. And I don't know if that's abusive or not, but I often think it's stifling, if nothing else. And stifling somebody is a way of abusing them. We only have so many days on the planet. I mean, if you've got a desire to be dancing or making quilts or painting pictures or anything, or writing books, and you have that talent, I think you need the support of the other person, because you ladies do it for us guys all the time. I mean, you're behind us 100%, and I sometimes don't see it coming from the man to the woman, and that is something we need to fix in our culture.
Absolutely. And I think, you touch on, and a lot of people have these questions, am I in an abusive relationship or marriage, or is this just one that could use some work? And there's some cornerstones of abuse that really call it out as abuse. And when you look at it, and you were saying before, I'm a dad and I worry about my daughter. There are some things that you can look at and find early on: fear, intimidation, control, isolation. Those are things that pop out immediately when you're in an abusive relationship or you see someone else in one. So the abuser immediately from the beginning tries to isolate their victims from their friends and family. It's the first red flag anyone can look for, looking from the outside in, or the victim. If your person that you're with, your partner, is trying to get you away from your friends and family and isolate you so you don't have people to reach out to, that's a huge red flag right there.
You also point out that the person who is doing the abusing sometimes gets accomplices, and they try to set traps. And it just boggles my mind that there are people that will aid somebody else in this.
Yes, my abuser specifically was masterful at being an abuser. And because they hide, you're saying, Larry had said before, how do we recognize these people? Well, it's not necessarily that you can pick them out of a crowd. That's what's really difficult, because they're usually very charming, outgoing. They can be the life of the party. They have these great big personalities. I heard, later on when I left, he was an abuser? Him? Are you kidding? So people don't necessarily look at them as a candidate as being an abuser. So we have to look at their behavior and not their personalities. And so to answer your question, Robin, it was more that his friends and buddies didn't necessarily recognize what he was doing to me. So he was saying, she's doing this, or she's gone crazy, or she has, cheated in our marriage, none of which was true. He was then, bringing them in to help him. They were more than happy to help their friend. They had no idea what was really going on behind the closed doors in our home. Okay,
so they weren't accomplices in the normal sense. They were kind of being misled by him. He was using what do you call it, Robin, in political stuff? Propaganda against you.
Absolutely, and this is very common. This is a great thing to talk about, because these abusers by nature typically have these great big personalities, and the victims over time, unfortunately, we get very worn down, very tired, often withdrawn, and we tend to keep to ourselves because everything we do after a while is wrong. And so we kind of stop trying, and our goal is just to get through the day without being admonished and abused. We tend to look like something is a little off with us from the outside looking in, and yet the abusers still have those great, big, wonderful personalities. And it's very easy to believe when the story is turned on us that something has gone wrong with us and that nothing is wrong with our abusers. And they do this to us often. When we finally come out and tell our stories, we have to be ready for that.
Susan, I have a question for you. How long ago did you leave him, or did the relationship end?
I left 6 years ago, Larry, and I do want to say I did everything wrong when I left. And that is one of the main reasons that I wrote the book Sparks in Love, because I did everything wrong.
What do you mean?
So you asked me before if I was a victim of domestic abuse or domestic violence. I was 99% a victim of domestic abuse. But what people don't really realize is domestic abuse is very often a precursor, happens first to domestic violence.
Okay.
And so
you got out in
we
time.
find out. Well, I didn't. That's what happened. I didn't make a plan for my safety.
He hit you?
And so I got injured on the way out. I did.
Okay.
I got injured on the way out. And what we find out with abusers is that they get very nervous when they're losing control of their victim. And he was losing control of me because I was saying, I've had enough, I'm out. And that's when I got hurt because I didn't make a plan for my safety.
Wow.
And did he abuse the children?
He actually, and the children, that's something that I don't talk a lot about because, you asked me before, and we were kind of kidding, I'm on the East Coast. I work with an alias because what I've tried to do is give as much information as I can about my story while still protecting the privacy of my children. And we've started a new life. So I don't talk too much about them, but I will say that they're thriving and they're incredible boys in their teenage years now. And we have made it to this day, and we're doing really, really well.
I wanted to ask
Thank
you.
God.
I wanted to ask you, since you've been separated now for 6 years, I wanted to ask you about the people who are still in your life who knew you back then. Do they see a difference that they didn't even know? Like, do they see a different you? And do they express that to you?
Absolutely. It's sad because I hear a lot of remorse from my friends and family because I kept it hidden so well, and I didn't reach out because I was terrified. And so what I've heard more than ever before is, wow, it's great to hear you laugh again. Oh my gosh, you're so much more confident. I can't believe you put your story out there. I've come back into the person that I used to be. And I've said, and I say in my book, I think the only way for me to heal personally is to go back and kind of find myself where I left off before I stepped into abuse, find that person and pick up where I left her, find her, and then move forward. And that's my own healing process. But I think for people that are, trapped in abuse and feel like they've been changed, it does change us to some degree. But what people don't realize about abuse victims is that we are really strong individuals because it takes someone very strong to endure that every day. And we're not weak by nature because we can make it through that and we can get out and then we find ourselves again and we can have a really great life on the other side.
Well, Larry had a story this morning about a 12-year-old girl who was abused by the same man since she was 9, and now she finally opened up and told somebody, and now it should be a lot better for her. What do you say to people to try to not let it go so long?
I think there's one very easy answer to that. I tell them to call the National Domestic Violence Hotline. And there's a reason for that. The people on the other side of the hotline are trained advocates. They've heard every story again and again and again. There's nothing that they will hear that will shock them, but they are trained to hear each individual story and to tell each individual how they can help. So there's free legal resources. There's free counseling. Everything about that call is free to the person calling. And you can immediately, from that call, understand where you are in the process and then start to make a plan for your next steps. Because I think as victims, we feel so alone and so isolated, like no one understands. And as soon as you connect with that resource on the other side and they say, oh, but we do understand, this is what we do, and this is what we can do for you, then you start to feel like, okay, I have a lifeline. I can do this.
One of the reviews is from a man, and he's given you 5 stars, and he says, I wasn't going to read it because I'm a man, basically, and that's kind of what it says, but he says, as I read Susan Sparks' story and read the controlling habits of her husband for 20 years, it became clearer to me that it is all our responsibility to look out for those who may be experiencing this victimized life. And oh my gosh, that is so true. I really think you're pointing something out but what would somebody have done? I mean, aside from saying, hey, you got to leave this guy, did you have any of that? Did you have anybody say to you, hey, Susan, you might want to think about a divorce?
I didn't. And I think There's kind of two answers to that. For me specifically, I think I hid it very well because I went on with my life as if nothing was wrong. We hid it very well. So I think that's a big point in and of itself. If this is happening to 1 in 4 women, we don't know everyone that it's happening to. So the best thing that we can do is put information out there and tell people, if this is happening to you, it's happening to so many more people than we know, and it's okay to ask for help. Call the hotline because you're not alone. I think that's like the first thing we want to tell everyone. And the second part of it is, I don't know that if someone had said to me, leave your marriage or get a divorce, that I would have even felt that they knew what I was going through and that they were qualified to tell me that, because I always felt alone and isolated, and what do you know about my situation? So that's why I created the sodapop.com, so that when people come to my site and they read about my story and my blog, they'll say, oh, she gets it. That was her life. And she's saying get help. She's saying she understands. Okay, now I'm in a community of people that understand me. Because our lives are really, really different than what a bad marriage looks like or a bad relationship. It's very, very different than that.
You said something very profound in your book, that you didn't want to have the label of victim. You wanted that to be you are a survivor and not a victim.
Absolutely. When you're trapped in there, you do feel victimized, and you feel weak, and you feel helpless, and you feel hopeless, and it's a terrible way to feel. And if you stop and pause for a moment and realize that how quickly you can get out and get to the other side with help, and the moment you are that you can be a survivor, the difference in that is survivors, we get to make all of our own decisions. And something that's taken away from us as victims is the ability to make our own decisions. And that's an awful feeling, down to deciding what clothes you might wear, who you might call on the phone, how you might spend your free time over the weekend. I mean, all of our decisions are really taken away from us. And as survivors, I wake up every day, I plan my own day, I pick my own friends, I pick out my own clothes. Everything is my decision again, and it feels incredible to be able to do that. What everyone else takes for granted, right, when they wake up every day, is huge. It's huge for a survivor. So that's why I draw that distinction, because I don't want to be a victim anymore.
Are you better now at picking out the guys who are most likely to be this kind of guy?
I would say yes. And I would say it's a process also, right? So now, I'm out of this for 6 years. I'm back in the world where I'm dating again, and I do so in baby steps. I see the red flags much more clearly. I know when to walk away. And one thing that I would say is I never really lost my trust in men, because I grew up in a wonderful home with a wonderful dad and a wonderful brother, and I have very close friends that have terrific husbands. So I know that there are wonderful men out there, and I know that there are abusive men out there. And when you know what the warning signs are, you're still safe in the world. And I think it's really important for people to get educated about what the 15 warning signs are, and they are listed on my website as well. Because then you can feel safer in the world saying, I know what they are, I will recognize them, and I can still navigate my way through the world and not worry about everyone that I meet.
Susan just referenced her website, and what I have, Susan, is susansparks.com. Is that the website we're talking about?
It's actually thesoda-pop.com.
Oh, okay, thesoda-pop.com. Okay, boy, that's Susan Sparks. You're a motorcycle chick. Look at you. Is that you?
She's tough.
Yeah, no, that's not me.
Oh, that's not you.
I've heard that before. That is not me.
The soda? Tell me again. The soda hyphen?
thesoda-pop.com.
Okay. So I wondered if you could... Oh, there you are. Okay. You look like a pastor. Are you a minister?
No, that's... So apparently there might be 3 of us out there. My picture's not out there. If you go to thesoda-pop.com, that's my site, and you'll see Sparks and Love on there,
okay.
And you'll see all of the content and information. You're really centered around...
Oh, I see it. I see your book. So can you help us understand the difference? And I hope this doesn't sound too simplistic, but the difference between domestic abuse and domestic violence. I think we all know violence would mean there's some hitting and hurting going on, right? But what is abuse exactly? What happened to you?
So, yeah, abuse is, I call it the silent epidemic, because our lives become controlled through fear and intimidation. We lose our freedom. I mean, like I said, there are 15 warning signs, but I can gloss through some of them so that people can start to nod their head and say, oh, yes, this could be my life. When you're hearing that you can never do anything right, when your partner is extremely jealous of your friends and your family and any time that you try to spend away from your partner, when your partner tries to discourage you from seeing your friends and family, is always insulting or demeaning you, controlling all the money spent in the household, that's a really important one. When you're losing your personal freedoms to things that you should have, like your own car keys, access to your social media, to your cell phone, when you really feel like you're a prisoner in your own home and you've lost the ability to just lead a normal life, and you can start to get that tip off that this has reached a point where this is abuse. This is not a bad relationship.
And one of the insightful things that you gave us about your decision is that you were thinking, well, I've got to leave, but maybe I'll just stay one more day. And then you were going over it in your head and you thought, well, if you just keep saying one more day is going to develop into months and years and you won't leave. So you have to do it when you first think about it.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. You have to reach out for help. I would say if people are even beginning to understand that they're in an abusive relationship, just go to my website and read a little bit about my experience and the warning signs. It's a great first step just to stick your toe in the water and understand that you're not alone. And from there, you can go to the National Domestic Violence Hotline and start to make your safety plan. It's overwhelming to take the first step, but once you do, it gets a lot easier. And I think a lot of women out there would say to me, but you know what, Susan, you don't understand, because what am I supposed to do about money? What am I supposed to do about where I'm going to live? What about my children? Well, I had children when I left also. I completely understand that. And that's where they help make your safety plan so that you understand what are you going to do about having resources and where you're going to live. What should you take with you? What can you leave behind? How will the law support you? All of those questions, they have answers to. Those questions are much bigger than us. We can't figure that out on our own. And so that's why they're there to help.
Susan, thank you for what you're doing. I think you are giving women another resource that is necessary and another way of understanding that what's happening to them is not normal. The guys who are doing these things really need to read your site as well, and maybe they'll recognize themselves. And I mean, the one thing that I've seen that's, I don't know anybody who's ever threatened to kill a lady's pet, but I've seen it away. Let's see, insults, demeans, or shames you with put-downs. I mean, I see comedians do this. It's not funny.
No.
I see, my wife, you should taste her cooking. Why would you do that? Why would you say that about somebody you love? Susan, thank you for what you're doing, and I'm glad that things are working out well for you now.
Thank you so much for having me on the show today. I really appreciate it.
And by the way, we have a copy of the book. If we have somebody who would like it, you can call us. You will not be on the air. Robin will talk to you and put your name on it, and it'll be waiting for you. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Larry.
All right, we'll be right back.
Clouds and sun this Monday. Shower and spots along the coast to the high 78 to 82. Partly cloudy Monday night. There can be a shower this evening along the coast, the low 63 to 67. For Tuesday, intervals of clouds and sun. Watch out for a couple of showers, mainly during the afternoon hours, high 79 to 83. Wednesday, clouds and a shower and spots in the morning. Clouds and breaks of sun and cooler in the afternoon, high 63 to 67. From the Florida Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Joe Lundberg.
Fox News, I'm Chris Foster. Talks to avoid another partial government shutdown have hit a snag, we're told, by sources in on the negotiations.
Democrats are pushing for limits on the number of ICE detention beds in exchange for some new physical barriers. Acting White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney told Fox News Sunday, one way or the other, the wall will be built.
We'll take as much money as you can give us, and then we will go off and find the money someplace else legally in order to secure that southern barrier.
Congress has until Friday to reach a deal to avoid a shutdown.
Fox's Rachel Sutherland in Washington. A teacher